What's up, everyone? Welcome back. To those of you who just watched my breakdown video, breaking down tonight's Cleveland Browns, New York Jets game in terms of just a general breakdown, I'm back to do a very quick, or hopefully quick, domination station tutorial on how to set up the tool here to run the lineups as you like them. Okay, we'll start with the basics, and we'll get a little more advanced as we go along here. But this is the Domination Station tutorial on my this is the Domination Station optimizer on my screen. And today I'm going to work off the FanDuel slate. It's Cleveland, New York Jets, so we're going to bring up this game. Here we go. We're going to run, for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to set it to 50 lineups. I don't want to do 150. Actually, I'll do 30. Let's go with 40 lineups because I don't want it to take so long every time I do a run that people are going to get confused. Now, I always use tournament mode when I use the Domination Station. One unique is plenty for a Showdown. Don't need more. A little randomization never hurt anyone. Okay, so the first question that comes up a lot is how do I control my MVP exposures versus my flex exposures? Here's how it goes. First thing you want to do is bring up the MVP tab right over here. MVP. You got to click on that. Okay? Now we're going to set up our MVPs. Now, in our notes before, we narrowed down a bunch of potential players for the MVP spot for this specific slate. I'm in agreement. So let's jump back over. Let's jump back over here. Actually, that's not the right one. I've got two Domination Station tabs open. That's never good. So, all right. MVP. How do we make it force certain players into the MVP spot, right? So, our candidates are Baker Mayfield because quarterbacks are technically king on FanDuel for the MVP spot. So, let's just give him a 30%er. Le'Veon Bell, our other kings are running backs. So Nick Chubb, his team is favored. That's a preferable MVP play on FanDuel. Odell Beckham can destroy any slate. We'll give him a 15 because wide receivers are just generally less likely. And then we'll give Le'Veon Bell a 20. Right? Now you might ask, why are you doing min exposure and not max? That is the way to control your MVP exposure. You're going to use the min exposure settings to force that player into a minimum of 30% of your lineups, 20%, 15%, 30%. We can't exceed 100% because we have only one MVP spot. So the max that we can do is 100%. And I like to leave a little bit over, like 5% leeway over. So here we've got 30, 60, 80, 95, and 5% to YOLO, let the tool figure out who it wants to use. Now, if you don't want a player at all to show up in the captain spot, the best way to deal with him is just to put a 0 on his projection. They will never show up if they're projected for 0. Like, who's this guy? I don't know. I don't want him as my captain. If you feel the need, you can go through. But this isn't generally going to be an issue. So the first thing I do after I set all of that up is I like to run the tool. Let's give it a run. Let's see what happens. Let's make sure that the exposures we're getting wind up being exactly where we want them to. And then we're going to look and see when we just ran the tool raw, what happened in the flex position. So we're just running it. No rules. There, you got a couple of Simeons. So without setting any rules, it gave me a couple of Trevor Simeon shares, 5%, 2. Everybody else is exactly where we programmed them, but Trevor Simeon showed up a couple times. Okay. Now, obviously, the Domination Station projection, or the DFS projections, seem to like Trevor Simeon based on his potential and based on his salary. Let's see how cheap he is. 12.5. Interesting. I like some of these other guys maybe a little bit better, but that's his MVP. Let's take a look here at the flex. Trevor Simeon, 14 points. Chubb, 16. Yeah, Jarvis Landry. So these other guys are projected so much lower than Simeon, and that makes sense. That makes sense. Now, you might say, well, I don't want 78% Trevor Simeon. That seems like a lot. Seems like a lot to me too, guys. It does. But I do think if Simeon is doing well, enough to even be in a lineup? Let's see. At 12.5, let's take a look. Because, yeah, now we're going to think about rules. Before we even get into controlling exposures, we've got our captains already all set. Our MVP is working perfectly. It's where we want it. All it took was setting the minimum exposures to where we want them. That's the beauty of the control of the domination station. You can control everything. Now, though, I'm looking at these, and I'm like, all right, it's a lot of Chubb. It's a little bit of Mayfield there. Now, why is it Mayfield 100%? If you look at all, he's probably close to 100%. Now, this all number includes MVP and flex exposures combined. When I want to control for exposure in the flex, however, I specifically need to use this tab for my controls. So that's very, very important. I want to control the flex using the flex exposures. Now let's go through this list. Demetrius Harris, don't like him. Rashard Higgins, Travis Wesco, don't even know who that is. Damian Ratley, backup wide receiver, that's a lot. Some backup tight end for the Jets, that's a lot. Odell Beckham, not getting enough. So let's first take a look at Odell Beckham and see, okay, his projection is a little bit lower than what I'd like to see. I want to make sure I'm getting some Odell Beckham. Same thing with Simeon. He's probably getting a little bit too much, so we're going to start setting up some rules. Okay, first rule is if I'm using Trevor Simeon in a lineup, I want at least one player who's catching passes for the Jets. So, because how's he getting there without at least one pass catcher doing it? Now, Le'Veon Bell is a pass catcher. Jamison Crowder is a pass catcher. Robbie Anderson, who we don't like all that much today, but he's a pass catcher. Josh Bellamy. And then Ryan Griffin seems to be the primary tight end for the Jets. Let me see how much Ryan Griffin we wound up with. Yeah, we got a little bit of him. Right, so those are our pass catchers for Trevor Simeon. Now, if we use Baker Mayfield, we want at least one pass catcher from him too. Sometimes we want two, but in this case, I'm going to do one. If I was running this separately with Baker Mayfield as a captain, it's different on FanDuel than DraftKings. FanDuel allows for less rules in a sense because that quarterback really tends to outscore the other pass catchers on his team. So we want to focus on quarterback. Whereas on DraftKings, the wide receivers tend to outscore. So one of the things I talked about in the breakdown video was if I have Odell Beckham as my captain, as my MVP on FanDuel, I want to set a rule that realistically, I don't want any other pass catchers. I don't want many other pass catchers from Cleveland in that lineup because at some point, if a lot of Cleveland pass catchers are doing well, it's going to be Baker Mayfield who winds up being the captain. So it's something to keep in mind. But for the basics here, we're going to set up a basic rule. Baker Mayfield with no less than one of his pass catchers. These are our guys. We're watching a couple of players for injuries that I mentioned in the other video, but this is more instructional than anything else. So let's run it again using this rule. Again, every time we do something new, we run it again. Take a look. That's the all. We're going to look at our MVP exposures. Going to look at our flex exposures. Just get a sense. Now look what happened here. In the first run, I got Trevor Simeon 70-80% of lineups. He was everywhere. Now I'm getting a little bit less. Now, does the rule need to be in effect for Simeon? I think yes. I think yes. The only way that Trevor Simeon really shows up in the winning lineup without at least one pass catcher from the Jets being in it also is if, he runs one in for a touchdown, which isn't out of the realm, but I'm trying to create situations that are the most probable. So I don't really think, for example, now here's that first lineup. It gives you Simeon with Ryan Griffin. All right, Ryan Griffin. So you're starting to get a lot of Ryan Griffin here because it wants to pair them up, but we can control for that. So now, I don't really mind these exposures too much, but let's say I did. There's a little more Beckham than we got before. I'm kind of liking the way this is going, but yeah, maybe I want a little more kicker. It's a crappy game, a little more kicker, a little more Jarvis Landry. So any of these guys that I want more exposure to, I put a like on them. So I might do a little. I don't love the Jets kicker, but you know what? Neither is anybody else. So let's give him a little like. I like the favored kicker generally more than the non-favored kicker. But look at that. It's interesting that 7.74, 7.3. So it's interesting that Ficken was projected a little bit higher. Whatever. Home team, right? Maybe I want a little more David Njoku for 10.5. I think it's a good price on him. He's got a good chance of scoring a touchdown, right? So I might put a love on him. I don't love Crowder on FanDuel. I like him a lot more on DraftKings, but he's going to be peppered with targets. So I'm just giving some of these guys a little bit of a projection boost by using the like, love buttons. Now, let's see if any turds are coming up more than I want. Let's run it again and see if any turds are coming up more than I want. I haven't even gotten into actually setting limits on the flex because I haven't had to. The numbers coming out are pretty good, but I do want to show how to do that. So again, I always run it. I watch what it's doing. And then work off of that. Now, let's say, again, I'm getting too much, too little of someone. I'm getting too much Trevor Siemian, let's say. Let's say I don't want him that much. I could set him for 20% max in the flex. I do it one guy. Notice that I don't have anything done here on the min salary side. Very important. Don't mess with that. On the min exposure. Min exposure is only used in the MVP tab to control your captain. Or MVP exposure. In the flex, we don't use that. We're just using max limits. Now, if I slap this 20% on here, I run it again, you're going to see very different exposures across the board. And note how, as it's running, and this is very, very important, Siemian never crosses 20%. That's what the max limit does. It's running, and it will keep him at 20% all the time. Where is he? Yeah, never crosses 20%. So in this case, this is an approach where I think the Jets' offense is just going to be shit. Siemian will be terrible, and whatever. Now that got me a little more Robbie Anderson than I would want. I kind of feel like if I have Robbie Anderson in a lineup, I want Trevor Siemian in that lineup as well. I'm just kind of thinking of rules. So I can't see Robbie Anderson doing really well and Trevor Siemian not, especially at Robbie Anderson's price. Where's the salary at? Oh, 9K. Actually, I like that. That's very interesting. Actually, I'm going to ignore that because I think Robbie Anderson at 9K can do well enough that Siemian doesn't need to be in there. It might be Jamison Crowder who needs Siemian, but he also gets a ton of volume. So, I'm not even going to use that rule. But, I like that. I like what just happened there. So, when I lowered my Siemian exposure, it actually raised up Robbie Anderson. But maybe, and I think that's fair. I don't think a lot of people will be on Robbie Anderson in this fight. Now, Rashard Higgins. Okay, so a turd is popping. Scenario number 2. Rashard Higgins is a fucking turd. Now he's popping 35%. I don't want no 35% Rashard Higgins. What are you, crazy? So let's set his max at 15%. We run it again. One player at a time. Let's take a look as Rashard Higgins never passes 15%. Boom. Look, he won't pass it. Max limits are beautiful. That's how you do this. Now, if you want more exposure to a player, all you got to do is raise up the projection. Now, look at how it's distributing now. Okay, now I might say I only want 20%. And I like the price on Anderson, but I don't want to, it's a little too much for me. So I only go 25, right? And you continue to make sure I get enough turdly exposure, that I have enough. Usually, there are ways I determine this. Actually, let me see if I can do that here. Let me pause this. All right, I just opened up our DFS Army player props tool real quick because I want to show you one of the ways I look at players and try to figure out, all right, how much exposure should I have to these guys? Okay, look at what this number is the percentage chance that this player will score a touchdown, right? Actually, look how good it is for Rashard Higgins. So this is really interesting, but notice some of these numbers here. They're a little bit higher than you would actually expect for some of these players, like Trenton Cannon for the Jets. I mean, the number is deceptive because there's essentially some rake built into this number, so you can back it out. But here are all these turtly guys under 10%, and actually when you remove the rake portion of this, it's like less than 5% or 3% chance for most of these guys. Josh Bellamy's starting for the Jets. They're giving him a 17%, so let's call that 12 to 15%. D'Ernest Johnson, backup running back for the Browns tonight. Rashard Higgins is the number 3 wide receiver. T.Y. Montgomery, this number I would take with a grain of salt. That's assuming he's like playing more, but 15% chance here. Ryan Griffin, that tight end we keep talking about, giving you about an 18%er, and I usually, like I said, I remove 5% of this from fluff, so about a 12 to 13% chance he scores a touchdown tonight. This is how you try to figure out, all right, now why is it running for a touchdown so important? Or catching one, and see, Odell Beckham doesn't have a prop for it yet for whatever reason. I don't have a prop for him. I can check that. Actually, let me check that. All right, so here we go. Here are some touchdown props for various players in tonight's game. And when you're trying to figure out, all right, how much should I play of this guy? Well, Nick Chubb at minus 139. I'm going to give you some numbers here because we've got implied probabilities. But at minus 139, you're going to have about a 55 to 58% chance of, or at least the odds makers, if you're betting on it, that's how much the odds makers say. Le'Veon Bell's about a 50% chance. Odell Beckham, slightly below 50% chance of scoring a touchdown in this game. Now, as you go down this list, you see, let me get my implied probability calculator going here so that I can actually spit out these numbers exact instead of or close to exact here. So, Odell Beckham about a 50-50 shot. We're going to give Le'Veon Bell about a 45% chance. Landry at plus 190. Let's see. They give him about a 30% chance of scoring a touchdown. Njoku, plus 225. That's about a 25% chance. And it goes down from there. But even look at someone like Robbie Anderson here, who no one wants to play, but he's got a plus 285 touchdown prop, about 20%. So when I'm looking for how do I do my exposures, you've got a 20% chance of Jamison Crowder scoring a touchdown here. This is how now Jontrell Hilliard showing as plus 325, but he's not probably going to play tonight, so that bet will be canceled. But had he played, they give him plus 325. So what happened? They gave the exact same set of props to his backup. Rashard Higgins, again, let's just go through this one by one. This is how you figure out your exposures, guys. Now, we have this tool on DFS Army, the player props tool on the Beat the Bookie site. Plus 375. The actual implied probability there is about 21%, but we got to take out the 5% fluff, so it's about a 15%er. That's for Rashard Higgins, about a 15% chance that he scores a touchdown in this game. That's what, if you had to bet it, that's what the bet would be. Look at Ryan Griffin all the way down at plus 475. I would actually bet that one because I don't see it out of the realm of possibility that some shitty tight end for the Jets could accidentally catch a touchdown in this game. So, but I mean, they're giving him about a 12% odds, and that's about the exposure that you want to these guys. That's how it works. So that's how you figure out when you start to talk about and you start to think about total exposures. That's how you start to figure this stuff out. They gave Ryan Griffin about a 15%, but he's so cheap. I'm going to go a little higher on him. You know what I'm saying? That's how you do it. You can go through each one by one. I don't like this guy, right? But it's 2. Now, if I run a much bigger run of lineups for my 150, I'm going to start to get an even more level distribution in my MVP. It's going to continue to follow exactly what I told it to do. That's how it works. In my flex, I'm getting exposures how I want them. You just watch it run. And if you start to see somebody pop in more than you want, you can abort it at any moment. Now, I don't like to stop the tool in these longer runs, because what's happening is it's not always mixing up these guys. This one's actually mixing it up pretty good. So if I paused it right here, for example, it's a pretty good indication of the type of exposures to all these various players we'll have at the end. But, you're getting a little bit of a little something, super turds here, just a little bit, and eventually I'll remove some of these super turds. I don't want too many of them in my lineups, like if I'm making 150, I never mind having 1% or 2% of any player. That's how those guys win the big turn. People always ask, how did that guy come across that random player? How did he fall on? And this is all they're doing. They're running it, and anybody, even a guy with a tiny, teeny little ridiculous projection is going to show up. So even at one out of, less than 1% of your lineups, but you get one lineup with Josh out. Now, this guy's probably not even going to be active. This guy's probably not active. Like, we want to go through it, and actually, when players aren't active, remove these super turds. But anybody with any sort of projection is eventually going to pop into one of these lineups, or has a chance to. So, that's the key. That's how you get this turd exposure, make it 150. That's how you get your high-level exposure. And if I want to control for it, now, again, I look at all. I've got 87% Nick Chubb in this run, 31% in the MVP, and 58% in the flex, of Le'Veon. I've got similar for Nick Chubb, and et cetera, et cetera. I can level all of these guys out against their touchdown scoring odds if that's how you want to do it. That's how I do it for MMA. I look at inside the distance odds and things like that, and some other things, and I like to set my exposures based on real quantifiable things rather than just I feel like this is going to happen or I feel like that's going to happen. And then, here's our version of it on DFS Army, and you get, ours are broken down in a percentage, so you don't have to use your implied probability calculator, but every once in a while, you don't have every prop for every player, so we can look them up, but, 55% chance-ish for Chubb, 30%. We talked about this for Robbie Anderson, higher than you would think, to score a touchdown with his legs or his arms. Njoku, about 35%. Jarvis Landry, decent shot. Le'Veon Bell, 40%. So these are the generalities. You've got projections based off of, again, we got to look for complete numbers, but when we have complete numbers, we can get a projection going. Where's Simeon projected? 13.25. Right? Whereas Baker Mayfield, 19.93. So he's the highest projected. But close behind are Chubb and Bell, and that's why this is the group that is our favorite group at the MVP spot. And again, let's go back to the optimizer. I've run it a couple of times here. Notice most of my exposure maxes are left at 100%. I don't mess with them too much. I'm just controlling guys that are popping a little more than I wanted. And I might increase projections on ones that aren't showing up. I might X out of players like Jamison Crowder, right? This is low. I'm going to go back to our player prop for Jamison Crowder. I want to see what that projection is. So that's got 10.8. We have him at lower than what I like. Let's go back to that. I might change Jamison Crowder to 10.8 here. Because he's not showing up enough for me. So I want to raise that up. Let's run him again because I want a little Jamison Crowder. The issue with him is they jacked up his price, and it's not an attractive player for the purposes of FanDuel. He's more of a PPR guy, but I don't care. He's going to get a ton of looks, and there's no way I want my exposure to him being that low. So let's see if that helped have him show up a little more often. It might not. That might not be enough. And this is very important as well. Just changing a projection isn't necessarily going to do it. Let's take a look. See, he's still not popping, right? So I want to see, all right, there he is, barely showing up. Now, why? Let's go back up and look at our numbers here, and you'll note that both him and Landry are projected very low relative to these guys, right, who are significantly higher. So the end result is the optimizer is going to try to squeeze these higher guys in, not take the 4-point drop for just, borderline. There's no salary savings from Simeon to Landry, and yet it's a 4-point projection difference. Now I'm going to change his to 13.5 because that's what we have him at on our props. But there's no salary change between these two guys, and yet Simeon is 3 points higher, and this one's a little cheaper, but also, so in order to get them to show up, we need to raise these numbers up a bit. And that's okay. Nothing wrong with changing a number. Get a little bit higher so that they show up. Those are guys we want. We want more of that and less of the turds. So let's see what happens now. See if we start to get a little more exposure to that group. Who to raise up? Landry. There. Now, all right. Now you're getting all Jarvis Landry. A little too much. A little too much. Right? So that went too far. Let's try that a different way. We don't want him in every lineup. Let's go 13. Okay? Run it again. Look and see what happens, because we're basically just controlling exposures right now. Still too much Landry. He's showing up everywhere. So what if we went 12.5? Well, let me just go back and look and see what the two Landry 12.5. Yeah, there he is, 12.5, and we'll lower him to 12. Okay. Now what? How about 12 and 11.5 actually? Now where am I coming? These numbers are arbitrary. I'm just trying to get them to show up a certain amount. Like I said, I go back to the coach's notes, and Jarvis Landry, 20 to 25% guy. So I want him to show up 20 to 25% of the time. Crowder, 25 to 30% of the time, right? Even at these prices. So I go back to that, and if the tool isn't delivering those sorts of exposures, I'm going to adjust it so that it does. Now, let's say I don't want to keep messing with it. Like, it's taking me too long. What I can do is, let's say I'm happy with 28% Jarvis Landry. I'm just going to set him right there. And what's going to happen is, where's the other guy? Where's Crowder? He's still not even showing up. That's because everything is going to Landry. So now, when I set a limit on Landry, watch what's going to happen. We're going to get a lot more Crowder on this run, because I put a 25% limit. So every time he's not available, it's going to go to Crowder. Unless I unchecked Crowder or something. There he is. He still doesn't want to show up. I guess it's part of the... Let's get back up here and see if I have any sort of rule that would stop him. Nope. It's just that Landry's showing up so much because I have a rule forcing Baker Mayfield with one guy. So let's go back up to Crowder, right? And we change this to 12. Let's see if we can get him to show up. And here we go. I raised him up to 13, and now you've got him showing up around that amount that we wanted, around 23%. And again, on our props article, you see that the touchdown prop for Crowder is about, again, 25%. That if he scores a touchdown, he's probably in the nuts. So that's about where we want him. Now, he's not projected to do this well, but we're trying to win a tournament. We're not trying to build the optimal lineup. If I'm just trying to build the optimal lineup, go in and, trust the projections 100% and do that. And just load up on those high-end running backs, quarterbacks, and don't fuck around with these sketchy wide receivers. But if we're trying to win the tournament, then, all right, in that 27% chance that Crowder scores a touchdown, that means he's having a big game. I want him in my lineup. I probably want Trevor Siemian in that lineup as well, which is interesting and a conundrum, so to speak. But those are the decisions we make. Anyway, that should do it. My goal with this was, A, to give you a little bit of a breakdown for tonight's slate, but much more importantly, to give you a breakdown of how to use this tool, how I use it, in concert with other things like player props. And again, the most important thing I'm looking at in player props is the touchdown receiving or rushing touchdown prop. Very, very important. These are broken down as a percentage. So again, when it says it, what this means is this is essentially the Vegas projected chance, the possibility, if you're betting it, of this player scoring a touchdown. Always remove about 5% because that's the fluff. In essence, it's 10% of this number or 10 even more. Sometimes as much as 20%, but let's call it 10%, 15%. It depends on which books these are coming from, where that's just built-in fluff. In other words, if I'm betting the over on Nick Chubb, scoring a touchdown or the under, there's a rake built into that number that goes to the casino, the bookmaker, whoever. So we want to remove that to get the true implied probability of something occurring, the Vegas implied probability. Now, why are these numbers trustworthy? I'm just going to give you this last bit of information. Again, how do I get to this? First of all, on DFSArmy.com, if you click on Beat the Bookie along this tab, there's a tab at the end here, or at the beginning it says Beat the Bookie. If you click on it, you can come over to the Beat the Bookie site, and our NFL props tool is right here, right under the NFL tab. But if you look at this number, why is it accurate? It's because people are betting money on it, okay? When people are betting money on the over and the under, you can go and bet the under that Chubb will score a touchdown. An implied probability of 55%. What does that mean? That means for the over, it's probably, let me get it in the oh jeez. All right. Let me do, I'll back test this, right? So in an implied probability of 55%, so annoying. Okay, 55% is like a minus 110, right? Let's get that. Minus 110 is how much? 52. So minus 120. Right? So in essence, I can bet this. And if I put up $120, minus 120 betting line, that Nick Chubb will score a touchdown, and he does, I will get my money back plus an extra 100. So I've got to put up $120 to make 100. But I can also bet the under. I can also bet that he won't. And in that case, I could probably, I could bet $90 to win back 100 because the odds skew that he will. I hope that makes sense. Now, why do I use it in fantasy and on showdowns? Because I want the most unbiased number. My assumption is for most of these guys, especially on FanDuel, that's why I love it more on FanDuel than DraftKings. For most of these players to be in the nuts lineup, they will have to score a touchdown. It's very unusual that a pass catcher, a high-priced pass catcher, or a high-priced running back makes the nuts lineup on FanDuel without also scoring a touchdown. It's not impossible, but it's likely. And when I'm trying to figure out, hey, what should my exposures be? This is the trick that I use. I want it unbiased as much as possible. Amongst other things, but this is one of the tricks I use. Anyway, for those of you who watched this video, the 20 of you who saw it, you got some really good tips here at the end. And hopefully you got a pretty good idea of how to use the domination station, just to throw it in at the end. At the end, download 150. When you're done and you're happy, click download. Boom. Okay, save the file. Go to FanDuel, contest. Here it is, 25 center. Why aren't you in this? Hold on, let me do it for real. I'm going to use this. I'm going to edit it later, so nice try. But I'm going to use this. Watch, check it out. I'm going to legit do this right now. I'm going to save it. Here's a little trick I've learned over the years. When you choose your file, the domination station always is sequential, so you can always scroll down to the bottom to get the newest one that you've made. Open it, upload it, hit yes. A lot of people ask me, how do I upload to FanDuel? That was it. I just did it. This contest is now loaded with 150 lineups that I just generated. I'm going to edit this later, and we have a video showing how to edit these lineups, of course, on FanDuel and DraftKings and all of that. But you just witnessed the process start to finish, including entering 150 lineups in tonight's 25-cent, whatever the hell this game I just entered was. Let's hope it wasn't accidentally the $25 one and I just spent all my money. But you just witnessed the process start to finish. Hopefully this helps. Yeah, to edit, you do a separate process called CSV edit, but that is basically the entire process start to finish. Back to this. We'll check this. I will continue to run this and mess with this all day, but it's actually really sharp to reserve your lineups early for all of these contests so you're not under the gun with reserving. and then just doing edits. And what I like to do if I enter a few of these different ones is do slightly different approaches. So I might enter one contest kind of with the set of rules that I had written out over here, just basic rules. And then I might do another one where I do specific rules for every captain and I do 3 runs. Very easy to do that for MVP today because we really only have 3 MVPs, or 3 or 4 MVPs, but mainly 4. All right, we got 4, right? So I can do, if I wanted to make really stringent rules, I could run Baker Mayfield at the MVP and include a rule, must include 2 pass catchers. Then I'd run Odell Beckham, and I would say, at most one of Baker Mayfield or the other pass catchers for Cleveland, essentially saying, I don't believe that Odell Beckham could be the MVP if both Baker Mayfield and other Cleveland pass catchers are in the lineup. So I can make specific rules around different players. Chubb, I don't know what rule I'd make with Chubb or Bell, but this is the idea. These exposures, you can change them. You can do whatever you want. You want a little more Bell, you want a little Baker, you want a little more Chubb, whatevs. You choose. Notes, domination station, props. This is what I'm using to kind of get this stuff all set up. Control your exposures, and you will be in good shape. Thanks, guys. Let's get this tonight, by the way. Hell yeah.